Your grandmother kept a can of milk in her pantry that could sit there, unrefrigerated, for over a year, and she trusted it more than the fresh milk in her own icebox. That was not superstition. For most of her life, that little can was the safer choice. And the reason why says more about how America survived the last 100 years than almost anything else on her shelf. We tend to think of evaporated milk as a baking ingredient, the stuff that shows up once a year for pumpkin pie. But to the generation that raised your parents, it was not an ingredient. It was insurance. It quietly solved a problem that, today, we do not even think about anymore. And we are going to get to exactly what that problem was. Here is the whole story in one sentence. Grandma bought evaporated milk because, for most of American history, keeping fresh milk from killing you was harder than you would ever imagine. And a sealed can solved that overnight. So how did milk in a can become a household hero? It started with a problem nobody could ignore. In 1852, a dairy farmer named Gail Borden was crossing the Atlantic when rough seas left the cows aboard too seasick to milk, and infants on the ship went hungry. When he got home, Borden discovered something simple but powerful. Raw milk is about 87% water. Boil that water off in a vacuum so it would not scorch, and you had a milk that resisted spoiling. He patented it in 1856, but he added sugar to preserve it. That sweetened version is the condensed milk we still know today. But sugar was not the answer Grandma needed. The real breakthrough came from a Swiss immigrant most people have never heard of. John Baptist Meyenberg figured out that if you heated milk to about 248 degrees Fahrenheit inside a sealed can, you could make it shelf-stable with no sugar at all. His old employer rejected the idea, so he came to America. And in 1885, in the little town of Highland, Illinois, he produced the first commercial evaporated milk. Unsweetened, pourable, and good for over a year in the can. Now here is why it mattered so much. We assume refrigerators have always existed. They have not. At the start of the 1930s, just 8% of American households owned a mechanical refrigerator. And even as prices fell, the cheapest models still cost around $152 by 1940, when a factory wage might be a fraction of that. So picture it. Raw milk is 87% water. It can sour in a day or two in summer heat, but a sealed can of evaporated milk stayed good for up to 15 months on a warm shelf. When that is your reality, the can wins every single time. This is the part older viewers feel in their bones. As late as 1927, 6 in 10 American households had no refrigeration at all, not even an icebox. Rural families, working-class families, anyone far from a daily delivery wagon. Fresh milk was a gamble. Evaporated milk was not. It went into the morning coffee. It made the gravy. It stretched a pot of mac and cheese to feed 5 kids instead of 3. It became the secret to a custard pie, a holiday casserole, a Sunday supper that had to last. Grandma did not reach for it because it was fancy. She reached for it because it never let her down. Then came the hard years, and the can proved itself again. Through the Great Depression, when nothing could be wasted, shelf-stable milk meant you bought what you could afford, and it did not rot before payday. And in World War I, evaporated milk production more than doubled between 1914 and 1918 as small cans went into military rations. But World War II is where it gets surprising. Fresh milk was never rationed during the war. Canned milk was, starting in 1943, because shipping it overseas and feeding the troops took priority. Why ration the canned kind and not the fresh? 2 reasons. The military needed milk that traveled, and the cans themselves were the problem. Japan controlled roughly 70% of the world's tin, so every can was a war resource. Behind the front, nearly all the cooking in military mess halls was done with powdered or evaporated milk. Grandma's pantry staple was, quite literally, war fuel. So let us clear up the confusion, because these get mixed up constantly. Evaporated milk is regular milk with about 60% of the water removed, unsweetened, creamy, and a little caramelized from the heat. Condensed milk is the same thing with a load of sugar added, about 45% sugar, which is why it is for desserts, not your coffee. Powdered milk takes it further, drying it completely so it weighs almost nothing and lasts even longer. And regular milk? Fresh, perishable, and for most of history, risky. Here is the question worth arguing about. Was evaporated milk genuinely the smart choice? Cheaper, safer, and more practical? Or did it just become a habit, passed down from scarcity long after refrigerators made it unnecessary? Because here is an uncomfortable footnote. In the early 1900s, that early canned milk was sometimes used to feed poor children and was blamed for contributing to a wave of rickets in 1905, before anyone fortified it with vitamin D. So was Grandma's loyalty wisdom, or just what scarcity teaches? Tell me in the comments. I think the answer is split, because the can did get better. In the 1930s and 1940s, fortifying milk with vitamin D became a turning point in wiping out rickets in America. And by 1950, adding vitamin D to evaporated and dried milk was permitted too. The humble can was not just convenient anymore. It was helping keep a generation of kids healthy. So why did your generation stop buying it? Simple. The problem it solved disappeared. By 1955, about 80% of American homes had a refrigerator. Fresh milk became cheap, safe, and always cold. And milk, drinking itself, faded. Americans drink about 37% less milk today than they did in 1970. The can got pushed to the back of the pantry, hauled out once a year for pie. But should it stay there? Honestly, yes. It still makes the silkiest mac and cheese, the richest pumpkin pie, the creamiest soups, and it is a no-spoil stand-in for cream that survives a power outage, a snowstorm, or a thin week before payday. The very things that made it Grandma's quiet hero still hold up today, because that little can was never really about milk. It was about not being caught short. It was thrift and patience and the deep-down knowledge that hard times come back around. Grandma kept evaporated milk on the shelf for the same reason she saved buttons and rinsed out bags. Not because she was old-fashioned, but because she remembered. And maybe that forgotten can is the most practical thing in your kitchen you are not using.